Testing 1, 2, 3. This is what, February 5th, 1995. All right.
My question to you is, because you had asked me the question on responding to Derek Bell. I'd like to write him, actually. But my question to you is, quite briefly, what are the keynotes that were helpful to you, and what do you think most of the people walked out with? What did it say to most of the people? Just in a quick book title fashion.
I don't know what I don't know what people walked out with. I guess the keynotes to me were, it's always nice to see someone who challenges authority and who does so consciously and explicitly and tries to recruit others to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's an organizer and an activist in that way, from the time, and I didn't take his speech just as a speech, but from the time I walked into Strongbows, it was, hey, come over here, I'm Derek Bell, join the conversation kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to students about how, things don't change in the university without the student engine behind them. And that, the faculty may have the right ideas, they may want to hire more women, more minorities, there were none 30 years ago, et cetera. And then, and I was kind of disarmed by that because his book, and the stuff that I think he says about racism is it permanence?
I gotta get his book.
He talks about the permanence of racism in this society and how Black Americans experience it as, though things are different, they're not all that different. And it's the space trader story says is Black Americans' worst fear of what might happen. And then he goes on to say that it's, in some ways we have traded. And that's a very harsh and kind of depressing view. And to have a person who is so genuinely warm to whites and blacks alike in the light of that, and who's, despite the fact that he thinks he's telling the truth about that his view is like those, as he says, of Martin Luther King or Jesus, and I don't think he compares himself there, but you got to keep on struggling. And that's something that I always have we don't expect our leaders to win every battle, we expect them to fight every battle. And it's that kind of attitude that was inspiring to me. And so what I take out, and the other thing I took out of it is kind of what, I get from some of your life work is that this may not be a solution to the world's problems the way we're doing it here, but it's an approach. It's kind of it's trivialized by think globally, act locally, but that example that he gave in the question session about the activist who brought the kids into the office, who torn his office up and hired them and got one of them a job and one of them in school. He says that's not a solution to the problem of crime and all this stuff, but it's that kind of you can do something, I can do something, we can do something to affect the problem, whether it's going to solve the problem or not. It's you do what you got to do in this world, and I guess a challenge to whites that, and to all of us, just that we need to deal with these things. So I may not have. That's what I took from it. What other people took from it, I think you're right. Is jobs. Jobs are key. Not crime, not drugs, not teenage pregnancies, not welfare. And I thought, one of the topics I wanted to talk about, with you sometime is work. He talks explicitly about work defining us. I think we define ourselves by our work, whatever we define our work as. Now, our work may not be our job, but there may be some difference there between. I guess there's not some difference. There's different kinds of work.
Did you ever read my paper on work? The only one of the few papers I've ever written. It was printed. It was published.
No, I didn't, but I'd like to. Anyway, you asked me this about that's what
Yeah. It triggers me a little. I think the subject of work. I'd like to make. I consider ourselves still in the book title area.
Right. No.
The subject of work. I'd like to give you a couple of essays. One I wrote, and one that a labor union guy wrote that I highly appreciate. I can't think of his name right now. I know it well. But I like to make a couple of comments on that, because in a sense it triggers. It's a way to look at, when I say big picture, what I'm talking about. When a Highlander in Nigeria, who's never ever heard the word job, goes to Lagos, the wealthiest country in South Africa, in Africa, Nigeria, and gets a job and gets a little tiny room someplace. Well, he knows for the first time the word job and work. He didn't know those two words before, really. And very quickly, probably in less than a year, his entire family will be living with him in that one room, and we have a new ghetto. We have poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And his and their families are now uprooted. My proletariat word, are uprooted from culture, from their language. They have a new language. They have new Saturday nights, and so forth. Now, work, very important to me, extremely important. So is socialism. The Soviet style has totally failed, and I'd love to deal with that somewhere. Why? Because socialism, with a couple of adjectives, is the only way out. But
a point on that. A couple of weeks ago in the forum, we were reading Acts, and people read this first part, and Dennis Friesenkarper, who you know, was. And she says, let's not skip over this one line here about how the early Christians lived. And it says they gave all of their stuff away. They put it all into the pot, and each took what he needed, and each gave what he could, kind of thing. And it was like, it could have been a quote from Karl Marx about communism. And this is apparently how they lived then. And he said, sometime we ought to talk about that, because we don't.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a cult in our society. And I just throw that in as something.
Well, I think I
hadn't realized.
I used the word socialism, and I don't think it's wise right now to spend much time on it. But if I were to have a party, which I don't have, and I don't know where this party is, it would be called the Revolutionary Socialist Party with Freedom. What the Soviet style had was not revolutionary, and I want to just say a couple words on that, because that's what I wrote in my 2 little pages. I really think most people are aware of the growing unbalance, disparity between the rich and poor in the world. I don't think you have to keep saying that. I think people know that. It's in every newspaper and everything else, And I think that most sound people, probably including Rush Limbaugh, want to change that. you know. And all sorts of people want to change that. Republicans and Democrats cost more than defense. What I'm about is a recognition and awareness that the problem of liberating the proletariat that's the socialist way of saying it, I guess, is far greater, involves much more than changing social structures. You can have all the Section 8 housing, you can have all the welfare reform, job corps you want, and in no way will that be revolutionary. So I'm trying just to get a word or two on the table here.
No, I understand what you're talking about.
And one right now is revolution. My word for revolution is change. When Clinton ran on a change ticket, that's bullshit. He meant well. When Gingrich calls it the new revolution, that's not changing anything. Pardon? Yeah. Just to confuse the issue a little bit, but what is at stake is what sounds grandiose or something like that, is man himself. All these things are not revolutionary. Everybody's working on it. And as long as we don't understand what's really at stake and what really needs to change, the structures that are destroying us go merrily along. The two primary structures that I will go through everything I say and do is the state and the instrument called technology, know-how. Those two structures, and they don't live without each other, go merrily along, whether it's Republican or Democrat. Don't think for a moment that the Republicans are doing anything about reducing the state and the bureaucracy. They're not. I will argue. It's a failure to understand that technology has a life of its own. It's autonomous. It's centralizing. When I made that earlier statement on rigidity, as our society grows more and more rigid, our society is growing more and more rigid. There's no question about it. We have more rules and regulations every day on everything. And all in the name of good and quality. And that's the real insidiousness of it. We have less and less democratic behavior as we call ourselves having won the war, Cold War, and more countries are now democratic countries. In the process, more and more cultures and traditions and languages are going under. Now that didn't happen. I got documents galore. I studied Vietnam for 15 years after Ho Chi Minh won. Because here is a pure victory. Backed by Russia and China in a sense. They won militarily, socially, economically, politically. They won the war. We got our ass out of there and didn't get all our asses out of there. We lost. And so now socialism had won. And now we're going to liberate the proletariat in Vietnam. I would love we could take time sometime to see how in the next 15 years the proletariat was. They never knew what proletarianism was until they got going with their new socialists.
Well, there were peasants.
Huh?
There were peasants before that.
Well, that's a whole subject too on why China after Russia and so forth. But they became slaves.
Yeah.
And work was the key. That's what was kind of played. That was the key to their freedom was work. That's a whole can of worms, but their re-education camps and so forth were unbelievable. The tiger cages during the war were nothing compared to those. And just like the gulags in Russia, they operated with silence. If Keith is in a concentration camp in Soviet Union or Vietnam, all the clan, all of the Gingrichs and the Reiners and the Terrells and Goods are not going to say anything because he's finished if you do, for sure. And so you don't say anything. It's a neat way to operate. Real freedom. So revolutionary socialism with freedom, and that's big for me. Extremely big. That does mean democratic behavior at the base. That does mean self-determination, real self-determination. And if we were to get into some ways out, which are more and more impossible for the third world and the whole scene, we'd recognize that probably has to be in low groups of 100 or less, even to be remotely possible to have self-determination. But that's a can of worms there. But back to work then. So I just wanted to say, just trigger a little something on, I am a socialist. I have no party. So I'd like to have a party. I'd like to be in a party. It would have to be called, it'd have to embody change, that we really are about real change. That's the thing globally, like locally stuff. It has to be revolutionary. Nothing that we see is revolutionary. Nothing. In a corny, this too shall pass way, the effort in Project Neighbors has been a little bit like that. I mean, it's because you mentioned the word, you didn't use the word I use. I use the word style. It's just to begin to understand that each one of us individually and then collectively, for this revolution to take place, each one of us has to invent a new style of life daily, a new way to do everything. And that's dangerous, costly. All change and all revolutions are costly, and today we want to change things without it costing. That's the negative I saw, not by intent from Derek Bell, but I didn't see that communicated too much. As people walk, that's going to cost the hell out of if you want change out of your life. That has to be done collectively, or it hasn't got a chance. But it has to start individually, of course. Our goal is to liberate the proletarian, and so, starting with the work thing, I would go back. I mentioned last time that there's two new proletariats. Proletariat of misery and the proletariat of affluence that meet all the definition of Marx. But we'll come back to that. I'd go to work just quickies. Because a lot of labor people don't know this, I think. You mentioned something, I don't remember how you said it, but and of course I read the newspaper this morning, and I'm reading Paul Simon's book, Bill, We Can Do Better Than This. Jobs, at least Paul's stuff is a little more real. I mean, he recognizes that no corporation is going to open their doors and have more jobs out there. And he recognizes that the only employer has to be the state. But I don't think he understands why that's not change at all. That's not revolutionary at all. Quite the contrary. Work, the union folks don't seem to know that the subject of job and works is rather new in our history. I gave you that Nigerian thing. Mm-hmm. You go back to Roman Greek slavery, the name of the game was not to work. It was to sit around and talk about the city. That was the good. And through that time, and prior to that time, including in the Hebrew Israeli thinking world, work was a sign of the punishment of God. It wasn't good at all. It's not where you got your to be is what you do, a la Marx stuff. You with me? It's what you did when you were bad. And obviously God's punishing you. The whole redemption thing, which was common language, you're bought with a price, meant that you could free a worker, a slave, if you bought him off. And then comes the very famous for us Lutherans, which not many Lutherans know, essay by Martin, the essay on the cobbler. All of a sudden we now we have to work because we just freed the slaves, I think that had a lot to do with Constantinism and Christianity as an ism. By that I mean I'm just making this stuff up as I go here in a way. For example, Mahatma Gandhi, he was assassinated. We don't really know by whom, but I mean he went for years and years the hated enemy of the British. They hated his guts. They wanted him gone. But because of Judeo-Christian statements and how we operate, they couldn't do it. Russia had no problem with getting rid of somebody at that time. You never heard of them, period. That's it. But we couldn't do that in a Judeo-Christian land. It's in that light that with Constantine making the whole Western world Christian, whether you liked it or not, and to kill a Muslim for Christ was the big good, with those statements of what Christianity was, and it was neither Greek nor slave, slavery, I think, ended, and so there are a lot of people that believe this, not because of economic reasons, but because of Christendom as an ism, as a religion fostered on the whole land. It just couldn't exist. It was totally contrary to everything in the Bible, no matter who read it, a politician or a believer. You with me a little bit, what I'm trying to say? And so, long-windedly, people had to now work. They had to work. And then for several hundred years, I'm just paintbrushing big here, for several hundred years, next question is, what is good work in the eyes of Yahweh, God? And it was deemed that good work was with nature, in your hands, and the earth, and the devil had to do with money changers. So the state all had a Jewish money changer as Secretary of the Treasury in every country. Doing the devil's work, which we had to have done.
Mm-hmm.
Stop and think when I say, in our little stuff here, when I say, in a full lifetime, not ours, in a full lifetime, we've gone from insurance and investment as a mortal sin. In one lifetime, we've gone to it's a mortal good. You know. And if you were to get a bulletin from the church at the university or a manual, you would have on the back side of the gospel lesson for today a big advertisement from AAL Insurance Company, who's printing the bulletin. But that's quite a switch in one lifetime. Well, going back,
It's efficient.
Huh?
It's efficient.
It's very efficient. I mean,
Progress.
It's progress. It's the good today. See, but I mean, what I get excited about is that no conference, no theological conference or anything else discusses how we can go from this one bad to this one good, which is totally in conformity with the world. The one we're in today. Total conformity with the world. Mm-hmm. The other one was in conformity with the world too, except we did have Jewish secretaries of treasury and bankers behind the scenes running it, okay?
You know what? I mean, it's interesting because you were talking about Constantine, and I don't know my history as well as you do.
It's a very important period.
But if the good was ever to kill the Muslims, that goes against thou shalt not kill as much as anything. And so, this kind of switch of insurance is bad and investment is bad to its being good is not new. I mean, killing is bad unless, of course, it's a Muslim.
Yeah. Well, just very quickly, because that's a major subject for me. I'm okay. A major subject for me because that was a very important period in the 4th century. 327, when Constantine, maybe his heart was in the right place, but we doubt it, okay? He was about to lose the kingdom, the emperor was, because of people going in several different directions with their gods. And here comes a religion deemed to be atheist. It was called atheist because they were against all these gods. Dionysius, Zeus, all of them. Christian religion was called atheistic. Little band of people. But they had an interesting thing. There's only one God. Constantine needed that. So he became a Christian. We only have one God. And of course, he became the chief representative on earth of that one God, and the church fathers went along with that. Because look what we could do. I mean, we could conquer the world now for Christ. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because that's totally opposite, 100% opposite what the Bible says. The numbers are small. Instead of crosses on your shield, it says the meek will inherit the earth, not legions with crosses on their shield and the Christ banner waving, the Crusades capturing Jerusalem.
Onward, Christian soldiers. Yeah. It seemed kind of ironic to me.
It's very ironic. Another major topic right along with this, very important to me. because I bounce between the two, theological and the secular. Today we're the most religious society probably ever existed, world. Now, the religions are extremely secular. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and there are a million new ones with nature and stuff like that, okay? All religions, probably including runnerism, joggingism, all religions have the book. The red book, the green book, they all have their Bible, including jogging. They have their Bible. They have their liturgy. They have their garments, if you will. Das Kapital, Mein Kampf. They all have the book, the Quran, and the Bible. Very, very intriguing. One little difference with the Christian faith, not the Christian religion. If you're Maoist or Lenin or whatever, Stalinist, or if you're Shiite or Sunnite, you can go to your book and see where you're coming from. Stay with me on be sure you understood what I said. I mean, a Shiite can translate this verse to mean kill the infidel. The Sunnite can translate this verse to have nothing to do with them. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
And Das Kapital can be taken this way or be taken this way, and you have a new offshoot. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
But how in the hell can you read the Bible, just what you said, and justify mass TV, the electronic message, or legions for Christ with their swords conquering the world, when the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth, and the numbers are small? Few are they who, you know what I mean? How can you say, whatever you do, don't take an oath, as we put our hand on the Bible in courtrooms, or take an oath of office or anything that says don't do that? How in the world can we call this an evil empire when it says, whatever you do from beginning to end of the Bible, don't judge? That's loud and clear. From beginning to end of the Bible, don't judge.
Oh, I don't know. The people interpret the Bible the same way people interpret Das Kapital. I mean, they see, there's enough said there that they see in it what they want to see.
No,
the fundamentalists.
But stay with me on this. This is very important. I said before that these folks would take a Bible verse, and one would take that same verse and go this way, and another one would take the same verse and go this way. In the divisions in the Christian church, you don't take thou shalt not kill. You just avoid that one. You find another Bible verse for your position and another Bible verse for this position.
I got you.
You with me?
Okay. Yeah, we ignore the one in Acts that talks about how the Christians live.
Yeah, totally. And we find something that toots the horn of capitalism, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what I'm going to.
But the Christian faith is the only book that we're doing exactly the opposite. It's not a matter of interpretation. Now, we find that's a whole other subject, but we find it necessary to kill, to live, to survive. Okay? But thou shalt not kill is still there. That's what distinguishes us between animals, which we worship today. We worship nature today. Let's be natural as we get more and more artificial in everything that we do. The big thing is to be natural. All the animal kingdom lives by killing. and doing what feels good. As a certain person tells me, my feelings. Yeah. But the animal kingdom lives by killing. What distinguishes man from animals is that we say no. To killing and a lot of other things. We say no to our feelings. But fewer and fewer of us do as we worship more and more feelings and process.
Let me ask something here. I mean, that sounds nice, but in some respects, the animal kingdom is much more principled than man. I mean, lions don't kill lions. Cheetahs don't kill cheetahs. They kill the lower species. Man, of course, kills the lower species as well. But man is the only one that kills each other. So you say, we choose not to kill. I'd say, if you look at the evidence, we choose to kill our own kind, unlike animals. We choose to say no to our feelings. That one struck a little closer to home. I'm just, I wonder what.
Or in the animal, the lions do what feels good. I'm sure of that.
No. I think you're right on the feelings, is that we can say no.
Yeah.
We do choose to say no to our feelings. We do.
I wouldn't be too sure even on the species. I think generally speaking you're right, but I wouldn't be too sure of that one.
On animals?
Yeah.
Well, I think, you get hungry enough and they may tear into each other. I'm just saying that I think you would
if we get hungry enough, right to the bitter end, even as we might kill somebody and eat them,
mm-hmm.
There's going to be some that won't. There's going to be some that will justify themselves as they go down. I didn't do it or something, get their goodies that way. Or certainly if you have a sun god and so forth, you don't mind killing the brother. Because you're going to get your rewards in heaven because of your ism.
I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. I just, it seemed counter.
I don't think it is. I think it's right on. We say no to what feels good. We have ability to say no. That's what it means to be human.
Okay, that's that.
And that is exactly what is at stake today, as a matter of fact. We're being predicated. We don't say our own no's anymore. We're predicted. We're being programmed to say certain no's, not our own. And I'm being corny here, but I never leave it when major advertisement, powerful advertisement, which means it sells. Be all you can be. Join the army. Nobody can argue with me that when you join the military, you can only say yes or no to those below you, your own. It's the only people you can say your own yes or no to. You cannot say your own yes or no to those above you. If above you says no and you say yes, you're out. You're dead. If above you says whatever, you cannot go against any level above you. If you're a commander, and here comes the supreme commander, you cannot be a human being. And yet we tout this as the advertisement of how to be. Join the army. I make a lot out of that, but that's our society.
Well, but it's kind of Orwellian.
Oh, it is. The difference is it's a happy one. It's will reward you well.
I just mean the speech is the words. I mean, be all that you can be. Join the army is a lie. I mean, it's a lie.
Absolute lie.
It's an absolute. I mean, it's just a blatant lie.
But it's going to make you happy in a world that has as its goal happiness, which can never be a human being's goal.
Happiness can't.
No. Say no to your feelings for the sake of another person is not how we define happiness today. Happiness is a gift. If you marry someone in which you are happy in your sex life, happy in your sport life, happy in your work life, happy in your home life, happy in all things, you have been given a hell of a gift that very few people have. And cherish it. Be glad. You didn't earn it. You didn't deserve it. It's been given you. It's a gift. You with me a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
Happiness is always a gift. If I've been given the gift of whiteness that seems to allow me to not work very hard and not worry about too many things, just remember you didn't earn it, you didn't deserve it. It's a gift to you. Exercise responsibility with that gift and be thankful for it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I cannot say that being in a re-education camp in Vietnam for 30 years is happiness. I have a hard time, even though I'm fighting for the freedom of the fatherland. I cannot call that happiness. Okay? And I've been given a gift that didn't put me there. I've been corny, but to exaggerate the point. I can't call it happiness living in an unheated, rat-infested dwelling in which I can't get out of with my kids. I can't call that happiness. It's a gift. Back to work. These are all major subjects. They really are.
Yeah, and right now we're just scratching the surface.
That's right. It's just.
I mean, in my view of what we're doing here, that's what we're doing.
In my view, we're scratching. So this is one lecture. I mean, it's not more one. I mean, it's one seminar.
One thing I wanted to say is that if there's things you've written, or it's like the family history stuff, I'd like to get some copies of that.
I'll give you that, and I'll give you the one essay I wrote that was published.
Yeah, well, it triggered in my mind. Are there other? I mean, I know there are some other things you've written.
Tons of this stuff, but it's incoherent. Huh?
Scoot up a little. There. Thanks. That's it. No, I didn't mean
it. But just a couple of.
Wasn't there? Didn't you write a history on neighbors or?
Oh yeah, you can have that. Yeah, that was a very objective history of the first 5 years, which is loaded.
I just mean there are some anything you can think of that's written down.
What I'm sorry about is I haven't written down some stories of the first 5 years. Maybe we can get to that somewhere because I've never done that. The joys and sorrows, that's not in there. Back to Martin, just to finish a little the work. Back to Martin in the 16th century. People are working, and so there's a shoe cobbler. Makes shoes. Captures the cow and skins it and dries it and everything under the sun and makes a shoe and sells it. And he writes an essay on this shoe cobbler. In the sight of God, this worker is as much of a priest as any priest. Sight of God. Very important theological point, in a world in which the cross and crown were the same, and hierarchy, authoritarianism, and everything. That's a radical statement. This jerk cobbler is every bit as much as that archbishop, or the head of the monastery, or the monk, in the sight of God, as a priest, the priesthood of all believers. It's radical. Because we worship authority and hierarchy and the cross and the crown. That was a sacred, very important word for me. That was a sacred. We got to deal with sacred. That was a sacred. Here, what Martin says, very few Lutherans would even know that essay. That is a radical, which we're called. That's a revolutionary. At that time, it wouldn't seem so today. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't even hold up today, which is the next point. But from that essay came eventually, and Calvinism and everything else came, the worship of the worker. To be is to do